Well, moving forward, I would like to announce about our next panel discussion on managing the unique challenges of family offices. And for that, I would like to invite Mr. Aditya Gadge, CEO AIWMI, followed by the panelist Ms. Soumya Rajan, MD and CEO Waterfield Advisors. We have Mr. Sandeep Nalekar, who's a founder and CEO Terentia. And the last panel is Mr. Rajesh Iyer, who's a Senior Executive Director, Head Investment Advisory and Family Offices at Kotak Wealth. Can we have the panelists on stage, please?
Thank you, Deval. It's always very difficult to bat immediately after lunch. So thanks for taking out that sheen of the new ball and making our jobs a little more easier. So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for being here again. We are really delighted to have you all here with us on the 5th summit that I've discussed in the morning. This is the 5th annual summit. But believe me, not many things have changed since the first year we started doing this summit. And I'll come to that in a bit. Times change, but it's very difficult to get business families to change their ways. That's something we've realized in our short tenure in the last 5 years of dealing with various business families across various generations. I'm sure the elite panel that I have here with me today will throw more light on that. However, India accounts for a large number of wealthy families in Asia Pacific. Asia Pacific itself accounts for 24% of the high net worth families across the world. Still, we have only 100 single family offices in India, close to around 100, maybe plus minus 20. Why? I mean, this concept took roots in the US in early 1900s through Rockefeller Group and similar such groups. Grew in Europe, but has taken a long time coming to India. This triggered an interest for us when we started doing this summit in 2013. And as I said earlier, not many things have changed. Of course, the awareness levels have gone up. Of course, there are many more qualified professionals now in the space. But we see a major challenge when it comes to the family's understanding of this concept. So I would like to break my our discussion into two parts. One will focus on business families, and the other one focus on family offices. Talking about family offices, our understanding is they are meant to serve two purposes. One is financial management, which includes investment management, planning, private equity, etc. And the second one is administrative, which is more to do with lifestyle, compliance issues, your succession planning, etc. Still, there has been the definition itself of family office itself is not really very clear. So on that note, I would like to start this discussion. And my first question to you, Soumya, one of the more well-known names in the family office circles in India, how do you really define a family office?
Thank you, Aditya, for the opportunity to speak today. I think what I've seen, I was a career banker for about 17 years before actually embarking on the entire family office journey. And one of the things I realized is that the family office word is extremely abused in the context in which families understand what a family office does. Traditionally, because it was always family office services provided by institutions like banks, the entire focus was always on the investment side. Whereas if you read a little deeper about what exactly does a family office do, it actually coordinates a whole lot of services for families and family members, and it's just not related to investments. A large part of the work that one does with families and family members is in fact non-investment related, which Aditya basically touched upon. So I think one of the things that I think is very important to establish in the context of what is a family office is really an entity which I think is really providing a coordinated set of services to families across investment and non-investment areas.
So, what's your reading about the Indian family office space? I mean, how many genuine single family offices are there according to you?
I would agree with your number, which is close to about maybe about 100 to 200 single family offices which are there. And just taking from your question and earlier discussion on why is it that this is just a very recent phenomenon, I think it's really because you set up a family office when there are certain liquidity events that happen for a family. Traditionally, Indian families and Indian promoters, whatever liquidity they created, have always invested back into their business because the return on equity was always much better for them there than, let's say, in other investment avenues. What has happened over the last 10 or 15 years is that you've actually had an ecosystem around private equity investing, VC investing into large Indian corporates, and therefore families have been able to unlock liquidity. And that has then created a whole host of issues for families in terms of wealth preservation, in terms of wealth creation, in terms of legacy planning, in terms of what the next generation does. So therefore, when you start looking at all those other aspects, then it becomes very important for a family to have a family office. And I actually have this kind of, Indra Nui, a couple of years ago, I think it had this 5 C's for, in order to define leadership. I actually think there are 5 C's in the family office space itself, in terms of why do you need a family office or when do you set it up? And the considerations are really around cost, complexity, coordination, in terms of conflict, and the last of the 5 C's is really around confidentiality. So these are the 5 motivations and factors that families will really look at on whether they want to set up a family office or not.
Sure. My discussions with some of the leading families, what I realized, and they've told us very categorically that we do not really have a family office. We have a family constitution that just takes care of the governance and succession planning part. But we've not gone for a family office. I'm talking to some of the real big families in India. What do you think? I mean, is it a lack of clarity of this entire stuff, or can family offices be, single family offices further broken into, vertical specific family offices? I mean, something, just concentrating on compliance, something just concentrating on investments, etc.
And I think here it goes back to the definitions of family offices. So whether you're looking at a single family office or a multi-family office, and there was also this virtual family office, which is another space as well, which I don't think has still taken full root in India in that sense. But my sense is that you will have all models exist. But as I said, it comes back to the considerations around cost, complexity, coordination, confidentiality and conflict, which is ultimately going to determine whether you even need a family office. Because for most families, they just need a really good wealth manager. They don't or often need a family office. So it's very important when you're having the discussion with the family that it's just not something glamorous for the family to set up. It needs to be meaningful to every individual and every family member, so that they know that they're actually getting the benefits of what is it that they're seeking the family office to solve for. And one of the things I was sharing with Aditya earlier was that for all families, you have to invest time in understanding what is the issue. Because at the end of the day, the issue may be a small issue pertaining only to investments, or the issue may be pertaining to how do I educate the next generation. But these may be solutions that you don't need a full-fledged family office for. So understanding, spending the time and to invest with that family on what are the pain points and trying to get to the heart of it is really, I think, one of the reasons also I think Waterfield has been successful, because we have spent time with our families to understand the core issue, and no two families are the same. If somebody tells me that they can actually give me a parameterized set of product services for a family offices, I will say, show me how, because all the experience that I've seen in this business is that everything is completely customized to what that family is specifically solving for.
Sure. So again, I mean, one of the recent studies we did, what we realized is single family office, of course, as the definition goes, are set up by the one family to manage their own wealth. But multi-family offices, there could be various reasons behind forming a multi-family office. It could be a family which started as a single family office and now just wants to share the costs with others and gets more families in place. It could be a wealth management firm which is kind of, scaling up the LIDAR. or it could be a syndicate of families who come together just to, co-invest in properties or, take some decisions together. So on that note, Rajesh, I mean, I'll come to you. Kotak, of course, has had a tremendous success and has created a huge name for itself in the family office space. How do you define Kotak's offering, and how do you differentiate yourself as a multi-family office from other wealth management entities which are offering, operating in India?
I think the simple thing here is benchmarking. I don't think India needs to really reinvent the wheel as far as whatever we are talking about. I think A is that there is a set way of really looking at expectations globally. And the nearest example that we benchmarked way back in 2008, 2009 fiscal is we looked at the Swiss model in terms of what a family office is. And I think that is the mecca of, where actually this whole idea emanated. I mean, you have examples in US, but I would still say that with all the kind of discussions that we've had in the past, I think Switzerland really, is kind of a benchmark for all this. So A is that ultimately the offerings have to be benchmarked, which is what we've done. So we have a model which is an investment model where, as Soumya rightly said, I mean, conflict is something which is very critical. So that has to be addressed. Sure. And where you're really working on a salary and advising and institutionalizing the whole advice. So it is not that, one set of customers receive one advice and the other something else. So advice, the color of the advice remains the same, but customization will have to be made depending upon what the customer really wants. So that is on the investment side. The other important thing that we added to the investment side is that we have this IC equity debt think tank, which I guess is a little unique because we all end up meeting a lot of asset managers and portfolio managers and all these buy-side managers. We talk about conflicts with clients, but you have a very inherent conflict of all these asset managers somewhere all being on one side because they all want to make their management fees and performance fees. So what we really did there is we kind of separated the entire thing towards creating a set of people who are essentially prop guys. It's very difficult to find people on the debt side, but equity we were pretty much successful. On the debt also we have some treasury people who are part of our think tank. So on the investment side we've got very non-conflicted set of people with whom we interact to be able to give that advice, which is a little more, I would say, a little longer term than what people keep on kind of doing. So I think these are things that we've really taken, to kind of understand from the European models. The non-investment is something which, there is a lot of such services which are there. I mean, right from an asset register, which actually, which clients were really very, elated to really find that an asset register is something which is just a kind of not an Excel sheet only, but it's a lot of macros around that. But you have one place where you can find all the details related to your family members and everything. I mean, as simple as that. All your data which you have, that can be digitized, So these kind of services. You have, of course, succession planning, and we also talked about philanthropy, where we actually pioneered this concept where if Aditya wants to actually do some philanthropy and he says that I belong to one particular or my ancestors belong to one particular village where I want to make a difference. There is a partnership that we run on the philanthropy where there is a set of people who will exactly tell you that if you want to be doing education, they will say education is not required, something else is required, which is more pertinent. So these are all the customization that we just talked about. So there are a lot of things that we've done in that space. Concierge, for example, I mean, a very an example, a recent example that I would kind of share of one of the clients who said that I want to fly a jet over, on a naval, ship liner. Now that was a very freak request, but we do have this partnership with a few of the guys who actually got Pentagon approval within 48 hours, and we kind of delivered that. And he actually flew the jet out of the Pacific in the month of May, and he posted it on the Facebook. And he also wanted to do something in Antarctic, where he wanted to be with the polar bear. So the point here is that the benchmarking can happen. I mean, succession planning is a very important part of the entire facet. We also talked about family constitution, but family constitution and creating this whole, it's an ecosystem. It's not as simple as that, because there has to be a connect with the promoter, and the promoter many times doesn't realize that there are kids who are going in different routes, and what happens post that to the business that they've been running.
Correct.
So, again, all these are concepts which are there very, very, very prominent in West, but to what extent it is really percolated, and we've been doing this for now literally 10 years. Sure. It's not that these concepts are not there, it's there. But I think, as Soumya rightly put it, I think there needs to be time spent with the with the respective families. Also, along with the 5 C's, I would add one thing, which is trust.
Sure.
I think family office is a little new concept. We've been just it's just evolving over the past decade or so. Families have not gone beyond investments to a large extent. They've obviously dabbled with the succession planning, because every year they're all threatened, all the clients are threatened that estate duty will be hit. I mean, you will have a regulation there which will come in the budget, and then they all scramble to set up the trust and all that. But a holistic view of the entire thing, there are many clients who have really taken it forward and done it very appropriately, but there are many more who would necessarily have to devote the time to really kind of make use of all of this what I talked about.
Sure.
I just want to add a comment on the constitution, because this is again a new area, and I thought it may be relevant to share it with the audience, is that a constitution, what we've seen is typically takes close to about maybe 2.5 years for us to actually put a constitution together for a client. One of the things we've also learned in the process is that whenever family members meet, you can't really have a kind of template or an agenda and say that, this is what you're going to discuss in the constitution. It's probably easiest to choose 1 or 2 topics and use the family members meeting together to actually look at discussing those sensitive topics, whether it's, whether in-laws come into the business, or whether it's daughters taking over or being part of the constitution or their businesses. So what we found, and just as in terms of best practice that we found, is that earlier we would always try and cover a whole lot of issues in the discussions we had with the family members, because we thought, oh, this is our one opportunity when we've got everyone together. But what we've realized is it really doesn't work that way. You need to actually identify 1 or 2 topics that are really important, and then focus the discussions when the family members come together, for them to actually discuss it and then mull over it, and really not take decisions at that point, but it could take a couple of months, if not years. So our experience has been setting up a constitution, or even having one, is anywhere between a 2 to 3 year journey.
Okay. So okay, sorry.
View on that.
Yeah.
Basically, we have been in this space. I have been in this space for the last 22 odd years into banking and basically family business consulting. Just to take on what my fellow panelists were saying, I think fundamentally one needs to understand maybe the family office concept per se. From whose point of view you're looking at it? If you're looking at it, like we represent a lot of families. If you're looking at it from the point of view, obviously, as Soumya pointed, confidentiality, maybe continuity. Today continuity becomes an issue, because when most of the super high net worth individuals or large families, when they are dealing with partners or wealth advisors or whatever, you see a lot of traction where people are moving and shifting from one bank to another or whatever, correct? There is no continuity that is maintained. Two, I think somewhere a lot of times product push takes precedence over customer centricity, and there's where probably families do lose the essence on dealing onto these things. Technically, if you look at multiple family offerings, I think that's more so from the segmentation of managing a particular wealth segment.
Sure.
India, I don't think has been new to family business concept per se, because earlier times when kings and those times were there, most of these people, they had their own office that used to manage across all the functions. So what is a family office all about to me? I think it's everything. You can't pick and choose that we will do a thing and not do something else. So technically it majorly sits, or one needs to really look back and look at the definition of it. In India, there are a few families who have set it up, where across, when you look at probably fiduciary responsibilities, investment angles, regulatory aspects, trusteeship services, managing companies, which is basically tax and legal angle, everything is in-house, correct? Where then you work with partners and pick and choose to whom you want to deal with, correct? Sure. So fundamentally, I think it is more important to understand. I feel, sorry to say, but somewhere family office as a concept either is misused or maybe it's lost its essence somewhere. It's not an extension of wealth management and private banking.
I completely agree with you, because every time we are doing this conference, we start getting these requests. I run a family office. I represent my own family office, and can I get a pass? And when I ask them, okay, what's the group company, what's the turnover, what's the family net worth, 10 crores, 5 crores. So people consider family wealth as, managing family wealth as managing a family office. Western countries, the definitions are still there. You say, okay, $100 million plus, you can set up your own single family office. If you lesser than that, probably you're better off going to a multi-family office. So I think it will take some time for us to reach there. But a question that I've been asking, wanting to ask you for some time. You go to a wealth management company and you ask them, okay, what's your, how do you define success? They'll probably define success in AUM. Okay, these are the assets under management that we have. How does a multi-family office define success? Both of you. How do you define success for Kotak Family Offices?
No, I think, as I said earlier, it's all about trust, and it's not, necessarily, any metric here, but I think the level of trust where, whether it is whatever I talked about in terms of the array of services that, and it's not that we're not working on it, we keep working. Right now we are working on social impact, because a client actually, start, because it's all based on demand. It's not that you will keep doing everything and there is no demand for it. So you evolve, and it is evolving. The thing is that anything that you do, all these offerings, if the client says, like for example, we actually were looking at a social impact idea, and the client said, what is your view? Now, when they say, what is your view? We are talking about, literally, it's like Series A, a startup, who's trying to do good work, but does the family office have the capacity, first of all, to even opine on that? Do we have professionals to really look at it? Do they have the gray cells, whatever you want to call it, and the experience to really, take proper calls on these? So what is the process around that? So my definition of success is that if the client says, investments, you tell me, I will go with it. Any of these, whatever you're talking about, I'm for it, just go ahead. So I think it's more softer. All the other things of AUM and, profitability and, all that is obviously the, the headache of the family office to really manage it, how they're going to do it, etc. But ultimately what is needed is, the conviction and the trust of the client.
Sure. So when you approach, when you meet with clients, what are the major challenges or what are the, what are the concerns you're facing from clients for, towards adopting a model like this?
No, I think the major challenge I think this industry has been facing over a couple of years and will going forward also face is survival. Because, Indian clients are not used to pay, very simply. I mean, they want all the services at a very, at a very economic cost. As a bank, we've been able to manage to really sift through all of this, primarily because of the fact that we have a banking, platform. Yeah. And if the client actually also banks with us, then we make some money out of it. Sure. But I'm just worried about generically the industry, because ultimately there are two things to it. One is on the other side, you have to create the domain depth, the width, to be able to really, satisfy the clients in terms of whatever you're saying, because you have to back it up. If it is a family office, it's a fiduciary thing ultimately. It's not something that you're just going and peddling and saying, hey, you know what, I just got all these ideas. Do you want to look at it? You will say, so you're my family office, you need to tell me. So first of all, I think the challenge that the industry will face, and which is very relevant for single family offices as well, is retention of individuals. How are they going to be incentivized? How is that practice going to scale up? And beyond a point of time, will you be able to really, delve into the realms of the uncertainties that surround each of the things that we try to do here, and follow it through, So I think that's one major challenge which personally I feel this industry has been going through, will go through, because as you rightly put it, there are people who just go and peddle family office and say, family office, sir, you can do it with me at 5 basis points or at 5 lakhs. Now, these kind of things really it bothers me, because ultimately they end up doing nothing but just disrupting the entire space. And a family office as a subject is much more serious and much more deeper, as Soumya rightly put it. A lot of time needs to be spent and everything. So I think that's one big challenge that I see.
Sure.
Is from this whole industry evolving.
Sure.
How are the participants going to really kind of see to it that they are up on domain, as well as they sustain and scale up?
Sure. We are running a bit behind schedule, so the next few questions I'm going to ask in a rapid fire manner. So Sandeep, my next question to you, what are the key attributes or traits of families who are successfully managing this transition, or successfully managing this entire, I would say, process of taking business from one generation to another?
I think fundamentally one needs to understand it's not a fashion statement. Okay, a lot of times when I meet clients, families do come across and they tell me, unhone kiya hai to, hamare liye something similar kijiye. I don't think it's a copy paste, first of all. Two, I think every situation, every family and the dynamics are different. So I can't fit into your clothes, correct? So one needs to understand that these things are customized. So when we work with families, on working with them on maybe creating a family constitution or protocol or family arrangements that could be there. We probably worked with more than 165 families till now. I think when you deal with them, they have their own misconceptions. For example, we were dealing with one family, Bombay-based large family, Gujarati family. And when I met the patriarch, the 78-year-old gentleman, he said, I asked him, what's one attribute that defines your family or one character? He said, trust. I said, okay, great. So I went, he said, you can meet my children. So I went and met three sons. And I met 3 of them, came back and met the patriarch and told him my readings. He said, Sandeep, you are absolutely right. They are confused. I said, then why did you tell me, you knew it, why do you ask me to put it? He said, I wanted third perspective. We actually got the entire family, nearly 22 people in one room, and set out a survey to them where they had to pick and choose MCQ. And we then published the results to the family on a point of 1 to 10, when 10 is the highest. Trust was at 1, which means amongst the family members, a lot of husband wives are not trusting each other. So families have their own misconceptions. So fundamentally, when you deal with these families, it's a lot to do with understanding as to what the family is all about, what they need, and then to spread it out as to what can be done for the family. So as he is rightly saying, trust does play a very, very critical and an important factor. And just to repeat, it's creating a trust, creating a family constitution is not a fashion statement. It does take a lot of time. Most of the time when we work with families, it's over 2 years, we have not really even closed out the structure. We are still, and it's a process. It's not something that you set it out. Sure. It's a process which is on a continual basis. You need to revisit things.
Yep. Now on this line, I recently met one family, next generation members of one family. They run one of the biggest footwear brands in India. The family is into 4th generation, and there are 16 cousins in that 4th generation working in the family business. They've created a family constitution, and the roles, salaries, incentives, everything has been defined for those 16 cousins for the next 15 years. I found it quite interesting. That really sets everything nicely in place, and everything can just go about doing their job, without bothering about who's Sure. getting what and why I'm not getting so much. Quickly, how do we change this? How do we make this the entire family office space more vibrant? How can we get in technology? How can we get more qualified people? What can be done basically by the industry to grow this space further? Soumya, your thoughts?
I think the big issue first for the industry is talent.
Talent. Okay.
There is a severe shortage of family office professionals, and that's also because what we expect from the family office professional is actually to be either Superman or Superwoman, because you are dealing with so many multiple issues for the family. So in that sense, you're expecting somebody to understand investments, you're expecting somebody to understand legacy, you're expecting someone to understand business and operating businesses, because what happens on the operating business impacts the family. You're expecting them to know about philanthropy. I think it's quite superhuman in that sense, but what we don't have at the moment is either very good courses or certification for professionals in this area. So I think that's a huge gap that we're dealing with in the family office space, because your talent pool today is only your private bankers. Sure. And your private bankers or your legal professionals to that extent have domain expertise, but are not really the generalists that you may need from a family office perspective. I think that's one big area for the industry that we do need to focus on. I think the other is really in terms of working with multiple providers and partners to create an ecosystem that allows us to take forward the objectives of these families. So whether it's working with trusteeship companies or whether it's working with law firms, these partnerships are very important for a family office. You can't do everything in-house. In fact, one of the big challenges of a family office is how much do you in-house and how much do you outsource? And then the question, therefore, is the ability to work with multiple providers, whether it's on the investment side, whether it's on the legal side, whether it's in business advisory, whether it's in overseas investments. I think the ability to create networks and partnerships is critical to the survival of the family office as well. And the third is really the issue around governance. Fundamentally, why are we setting up a family office? A lot of families look at it from a risk and governance perspective, both in terms of establishing it for the current generation and for their legacy going forward. So I think these are the three big things that the industry needs to address if it means that we're going to survive. And just taking one point from Rajesh, Rajesh mentioned that people don't pay fees. I'd like to clarify that. we are a fee-based only company, and we've been able to do it because we've been able to demonstrate value for a family. So the concept that Indians don't pay fees, I think, is changing and changing fairly rapidly. This industry and this set of individuals needs to appreciate that if you want to stay relevant, you're going to have to show value add. The problem is that all of us are quite taken up with the fees that we may be receiving through other streams, not realizing that having to value add to a family means that you need to be that much better and ahead of the curve, which means you have to invest more in your own learning and your own ability to see what are the trends emerging forward. So my sense is families are paying fees. We have 32 fee-paying families who work with us. And they value what we bring to the table because there is no conflict of interest in our dealings with them. Yes, it means that we have to work with them much more deeply and in a more engaged manner, but we're also testing the boundaries because we had nothing when I first started this company. I didn't even know how to price a service because there was nobody out there who even said this is what you should be pricing your services for. So it's almost been test and learn for us these last couple of years. But what I can tell you is that families put a premium on trust. And if they find that they can trust you and that you're working in their best interest and you can provide value add, they are there to be your client for life and for generations.
Sure. Rajesh, any final thoughts on what can be done?
Yeah, I think I would still say it's pretty premature because we've just seen about 4-5 years of assets on the family office side, and it's too premature to really, take calls either ways. We are all optimists by nature. I think we need to invest in the right set of things, which we will do. And as long as we are able to kind of show sustainable delivery of whatever has been promised, and keep getting closer to the client and their family over a period of time, is when I think this whole business will really attain critical mass. I personally believe that really what we are talking about is not critical mass, and it will take at least another 5 to 10 years to really reach that level where we can actually say that we have arrived. Family office in India is not arrived, according to me, and I think there are more statements today than, or more rhetoric than delivery. And every institution and every set of groups or individuals have their own set of issues, but I think people are understanding and they will wake up to the reality, and I think you will see consolidation and far better, sharper focus in this area.
So Sandeep?
Yeah, so from my point of view, I think one very clearly, we are talking of something which is yet evolving. Okay, I would call the Indian economy to be more so a millennial economy because it was opened up in 1991, correct? I think wealth, a significant wealth has only got created post that. So I think there's some more time for this industry to mature. I think too, people like you who have taken a certain role and initiative like this, I think needs to contribute more where maybe we can reach out to the actual families who get benefited because of this. And also, we being an ex-banker, I think somewhere we also have spoiled our clients and the market segment where in the heat of competing with each other, I think it's we to be blamed. If Kotak is pitching a product to a client, I go and cut short and maybe offer him free. I think somewhere there has to be some regulation around this where there's a level playing parity around there, where people are playing on a level playing field, correct? Other than that, I think somewhere when we talk of conflict, fundamentally in our company, we don't offer any wealth advisory service at all to our client.
Right.
We are a fiduciary and a family business advisory company. If I start taking calls on an investment for a client, obviously it's a very exciting game where you're investing or you're playing around or you're investing money for clients. Very clearly in our organization, we have taken a call that we will not do wealth advisory service and leave it to best people. There are my colleagues and my fellow panelists and friends around who are better to do it. Sure. I think today the time has come where you pick a specialist and stick to that specialist for that specialist job.
Sure.
And then maybe pick a wealth advisor or pick a compliance person to do that specific job. Coming back to what it is, I think somewhere we are responsible, we need to the responsibility of taking it forward. Maybe you need to put up a forum where family owned offices or partners like us can come together, share our issues, maybe address and see as to what we can do to improve the situation. So honestly, the answer is with you.
Thank you. No, so a lot has changed, of course, in terms of awareness, as I said in the beginning. I'm sure the next 2-3 years will be even more interesting. We at AIWM are expecting close to 300 single family offices in the next 2 years. That's based on the discussions. There are a lot of big families sitting on the sidelines who've not really got into this, but I'm sure they're going to get into it in the next couple of years. We see close to 500 plus families coming to multi-family offices for their service, for their service requirements. On that note, we are running behind time, but if there are a few questions, we'd like to take a few quick questions here for the panelists.
I had a question. You guys are speaking a lot about the whole fashion concept of saying a family office, etc. It appears it's a bit chicken and egg, right? I mean, at what point does one move to professionally management versus someone in the family managing the wealth? So is it a threshold of number or is it threshold of family members?
Yeah, if you ask me, I would say it should be need-based, correct? Obviously, when so let me take the liberty of saying my fellow panelists are not somebody who will be cheap because I don't do that service. They would be charging a certain fee to manage the advisory space that they do because they have experts to do that, correct? Now for a family, one needs to ascertain as to whether I can afford that service and whether I need that service, okay? I have dealt with quite a lot of families where families are slightly lost because one, they have built their business to a certain level. So I'll give an example. I was a part of a meeting where a large FII was looking at investing in a company, correct? Obviously, we were trustees, we were advising them on the family constitution bit, so I was a party to the discussion. And the next generation, the son, who is a 38-year-old gentleman, was sitting next to me and was fiddling with his phone. He was playing some Candy Crush or something. Here you're talking of some $1 billion worth of investment, and you're playing Candy Crush. Now, what do you do with such? What do you do in such situations? I think it's important to understand whether your next generation can take it forward. If not, then I think it's time for you to create the entire family constitution bit. If that says that it takes 2 years, great, please do it. So it's not fundamentally with value per se, but yeah, if I have to put a value to it, I still feel that our starting point could be anywhere between 300 to 500 crore plus families where they can afford to do it. I think below that, I don't think you need a full hog family constitution. You can just get some family understanding arrangements done and a simple document. Everyone doesn't need it. A basic document that takes care of it. If I answered your question.
Hi, this is Gopal here. Just want to check. When you enter into a multi-client family office practice, which are the regulations that govern this practice?
Yeah, here.
Here.
Can you just
regulations? Are there any regulations for multi-family office?
See, like when you are getting into investment advisory, maybe
so
SEBI,
just to let you know, for instance, at Waterfield, we are registered as SEBI investment advisors in order to set up a multi-family office. My sense is that a lot of the regulation, if you look at what's been coming out of the RBI as well as SEBI, is a lot more distinction in terms of what is distribution and what is advice. So I think where the family office will ultimately sit is advice and advisory services, and therefore would be registered under the SEBI investment advisors, though I have seen a couple of family offices that have PMS licenses because they actually manage discretionary portfolios as well, or they may be regulated under the AIF because they've structured themselves mostly as an investment vehicle in order to make investments into other unlisted companies or otherwise.
So maybe, is it fair to assume that even in India today, family office is more being resembling like an investment advisory firm rather than doing anything else?
I think it actually borders, at least for us, where I think of us more as financial consultants because a lot of the work that we do is not based on the assets that we advise on, but on the scope of services and the time and effort that we spend. So we look more like a law firm in terms of time spent on that client.
And,
Just
you
one-
to do say kind of a state planning or philanthropy in that process when you say maybe creating trust or other things, and you might need some law knowledge also, right? So in terms of the constitution of the firm, advocate and say a chartered accountant and say a tax practitioner all can come under one umbrella and the firm is registered under RIA.
Yes, well the thing is that we actually work externally with the client's law firms or the client's chartered accountants, because what you don't want to do is you don't want to disturb decades of relationship which may be built with, let's say, specifically with legal firms, because for a lot of families in India, they go specifically to a particular lawyer because they've worked with them right through decades. That's not something you really want to disturb. So it is actually an engagement where what does the family office do? You are actually solving for the time that that family would have otherwise spent in dealing with the legal resources or otherwise. So you then become the front of that family vis-a-vis whether it's a lawyer, whether it's a chartered accountant, whether it's the auditor, whether it's the, let's say, in terms of philanthropy. You are that person, because the fundamental issue, families come to you saying, I want to spend time on doing what I like the most. I don't want to be really involved in doing all this, but I want to know that there's a professional set of managers out there who are looking out for me at every stage. So the RIA license only covers the investment side. The rest of it, you're technically a consultant in many ways to the family.
So that's the point I'm saying. So today, when you become the intermediary agency, right, you are supposed to engage for every problem or every field the experts who is licensed to practice in that space, correct? So today maybe are we taking a shortcut of saying that because I'm a RIA, today maximum family offices are actually doing more towards the investment rather than towards many other things?
That is a question for my colleagues to answer.
Yeah, because I'm just trying to understand in terms of evolution.
Yeah, you're right.
In terms of evolution of this concept in India.
You're absolutely right. It starts from investments with a license from SEBI and if you're a bank from RBI. And then later, you kind of more are kind of an intermediary wherein there is no licensing which is required.
And is that really the reason of the scope crisis? Because
No,
as soon as we say, actually I'm expert in investment, and if there is a client need of, say, a trust creation, you land up, say, engaging at a legal firm, and he says, then why do I need you? I can go directly to the legal firm.
No, because at the end of the day, in a family office, the way it works is that, put yourself for a moment as a single family office, right? You are dealing on behalf of that client.
No, single family office is fine.
No, hang on. In order to, no, it's no different. You are trying to find the best solution for that family with whoever it is. So if I'm a single family office and let's say that I've got a complex legal problem, I will go to the lawyer that gives me the best solution. The same analogy works for the multifamily office as well. I am no different, except instead of looking after one family, I'm looking after multiple families. But my responsibility to that family does not change. I am still expected to find the best solution for that client wherever it is. If it means that I have to deal with 5 law firms to find out which is the best law firm for that client, that is my responsibility as his multifamily office advisor. That is my role.
Which I am clear. What I'm trying to simply understand.
Gopal, sorry, we are running half an hour
No
behind.
problem.
We can take this question in the break. Sandeep, you want to add a quick line to it?
Basically,
to me, family office is like GPs. You know, if I have a heart problem, I'm not going to go to a dentist. I need to go to a specialist who deals in the heart, right? If my leg has broken, I'll go to ortho, right? So you need to understand he's like a GP where he's going to depend on somebody. So I think somewhere this really, the environment fits well, where somebody like Ensom would take a help of a legal advisor or a trusteeship company to help the client needs. So that's what.
So, sorry for cutting you short, and I see that a lot of hands there. I'll request all of you to take the questions with the panel separately during the break. We'll have a quick tea break and then we come back for our next sessions. So, thank you panelists for making it.
Thanks a lot.